work in this area, but because this was a part that was under renovation and some people were moving, and because of simply the sturdiness of the building, 189 people died, a tragic number, but it could have been worse if not for the fortress quality of the way this building was built back during World War II. And you know, at the time, they didn't have much steel because steel was needed for the war effort, so they had to use a lot of concrete to make this building strong enough to withstand. And originally, they didn't think the Pentagon was going to be used after World War II. They thought it would probably become a storage facility, so they made the specifications strong enough that it could hold thousands of pounds of records, and you know how heavy those can be. So the Pentagon is very solidly built. They say when they rebuild it, they'll be putting more steel in to reinforce it. It'll be even stronger.
And just to briefly underscore something, when we, and 189 is a lot of people, and in no sense is this intended to minimize that, but that includes the 44 people, I think,
64
is the right number.
People.
60 on the
64
airplane.
People.
Yeah, who were on the airplane. So actually, the death toll from people who were actually working at the Pentagon
was 125.
And that's particularly, that number is especially low when you consider some of the earlier reports. Jamie, as we go along, we need to begin, I think, I do at least, focusing more on how, not the building, but the people inside the building, what they're doing, and what plans may be in play. And as we go along this afternoon and tonight, I suspect we'll be heading in that direction. Thanks for your work today. No one believes, by the way, that there are any more survivors in the rubble of the Pentagon. That number now is a pretty firm number. Not the case here in New York, where it's still unclear if any of the 5,000 or so people who are listed as missing may still be alive, which is why people continue to come to the Armory in New York to bring information about their missing loved ones. Elizabeth Cohen remains on duty there. Elizabeth.
Aaron, exactly. That's why they come to the Armory, and today they have a new reason to come to the Armory. The officials inside are taking DNA swabs. They're swabbing the inside of blood relatives' cheeks to try to cross-match with DNA found on the site. And we'll talk about that a little later. Before we get to the DNA, I want to introduce you to Mary Hart Wolfenberger and her nephew, Jed Hart. They're looking for Mary's brother, John Hart. Thank you for coming out here with us. I want to ask you, he was in the second tower, and after the first explosion managed to call his wife.
Yes, my brother was in the South Tower, and after the first plane hit, he did call his wife in California and told her that he was fine, they were evacuating, and that he would call her as soon as he was safe. We had reports that he did make it to the ground floor, but that he went back in to try to help other people. After the second plane hit, John did call his wife again on his cell phone and tell her that he was in trouble, and that cell phone did go dead, and that was the last we have heard from my brother. But we're working hard here and trying to give all the information we can to the authorities inside the Armory, trying to provide them with any information that might help John's family to bring John home. I wanted to encourage all of the folks who are down working in that terrible rubble where my brother is, and the folks who are going to be receiving the DNA samples that we gave today, that they're telling us those DNA samples are being sent to Albany, and there must be an army of lab workers up there who are going to be working with that, and we really want to encourage those folks and tell them how important it is to help us find my brother John and bring him home.
This is your brother's Christmas card right down here. Can you introduce us to his family?
Yes, this is my brother's family in California, in Danville, California. This is Emily, who is 5 years old, Weston, who is 7, Amy, who is a senior in high school, and Jeff, who is a sophomore at Kent State University in Ohio. And
they live in California. Tell me why he was here.
John is an employee of Franklin Templeton, the mutual fund company, and they have a subsidiary at the World Trade Center, Fiduciary Trust. My understanding is Fiduciary had more than 700 employees in the South Tower. John was here to teach a seminar on the day of the disaster, and all of the employees of Fiduciary who were in that seminar are missing.
Mary, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mary went in and gave a swab today as John's sister. The swabs are best actually not from a sibling but from a parent or a child, and Mary was describing what sounds to me like a very sad scene. People yesterday weren't bringing their children in here because, of course, how could they help, but today they can. So children are inside having their cheeks swabbed so that they can help find their parents. They've set up a little playroom with toys for the children, but again, the children and the parents are the best people to swab, so people are bringing their children in. They're swabbing their cheeks so they can match the DNA up with their parents. Aaron?
Elizabeth, I don't believe we've talked much about this, but when you watch the workers behind us over at the Trade Center site, it is such a meticulous effort, and they are looking for, and this is gruesome, but any remains they can find, and that's where this DNA comes in. And the reason they do this is because people need this sense of, I hate this word, but closure, of completion. They need something that says their person, their friend, their husband, their wife, whatever, has come home in some way. It's very
Absolutely,
difficult.
absolutely. They need a sense. Actually, Mary told me, but I interviewed her off camera, and she said, "I am feeling pessimistic now. I have less hope, but I want him to come home one way or another."
Yeah. Elizabeth, thank you. We'll be checking in again. Down at, really, I think I saw the number 4,700 have been a good deal number of people have been checked into hospitals, and that actually goes on even now because it's dangerous down on the work site. People slip, fall, get hurt, get things in their eyes. Dr. Sanjay Gupta is down there for us. Doc, what is the scene?
Good afternoon, Aaron. That's exactly right. We don't have as many patients here as I think the doctors were expecting originally. In fact, there's only about 30 to 35 patients that are still in the hospital today, 4 days later from Tuesday. But we do see a lot more, as you can see behind me, Aaron. It's really striking, a sort of missing persons wall with many people gathered around it. You can see an American flag. A lot of folks are coming up here, putting up the signs of their loved one, the posters of their loved ones, and a lot of neighbors, friends, relatives are coming by to check those things out. As people in the leadership of this country are investigating who might have committed this tragedy, there are other sorts of investigations going on as well, a little bit more grisly, and that is the identifying of the bodies. And there are many different techniques. Elizabeth and you just sort of were talking about DNA. I spoke to a couple of the medical examiners that talked specifically about other techniques they might use. One thing they told me that was rather striking is that almost never do they use visualization alone, looking at a picture of a corpse. That is almost never the only way a body is verified. They look at x-rays, dental x-rays. They look at x-rays that the patient may have had beforehand. They look at all sorts of different skin markings, such as tattoos, and certainly DNA, any DNA off a razor, toothbrush, hairbrush, anything that can be brought in can be compared, and certainly the DNA of the parents is also the most useful. These are what the medical examiners are sort of dealing with now. It is a grisly task. About 92 bodies only have been identified as of yet, so they have a lot of work in front of them. Aaron.
I'm just thinking as you were talking about when you said it's not as busy, thank goodness, as it was, maybe as the people expected, what it must have been like at St. Vincent, which is, I think, the closest big hospital, at least, to the Trade Center, what it must have been like there Tuesday at about noon as the flood of injured came in.
That's right. I talked to a lot of the doctors here, some of whom are my close friends, Aaron, and they said that they were expecting thousands of patients. They were on standby. They were calling people to have them ready to come in should the demand be there. And frankly, they were surprised. After that first wave of patients that they referred to as the walking wounded, people who had mainly abrasions, smoke inhalation, eye injuries, things like that, they weren't seeing a lot more patients. And that certainly was a sort of a harbinger that they did not want to see, Aaron.
I was going to say, I'm sure they would have liked to have been a lot more busy in that regard than it turned out. Doc, thanks for your work here. We appreciate it. Back to Atlanta for a bit, special edition of Talk Back Live, and Bobby Batista. Bobby.
Well, Aaron, the talk has been continuing while you've been bringing us up to date, and we will continue on here for another 35 minutes or so. By the way, we are taking viewer phone calls and email, as you know. We, as we understand it, we're being simulcast on several radio stations, so if you want to call, the number is 1-800-310-4CNN, or send us an email to talkback@cnn.com. As we continue, Congressman Jerry Nadler is still with us. Congressman Tom Reynolds had to leave. We understand understand. And James Zogby of the Arab American Institute is still with us. And yeah, we'll go ahead, Congressman Nadler, and then I want to ask.
I just want to add one thing here that really people haven't focused on. People think of the World Trade Center area as a great commercial area, and it obviously is. But in the last 10 years, it has also become a residential area. 25,000 people live in that neighborhood below Chambers Street, and in the area in which, except for emergency vehicles, there's no transportation in and out. And my office and the office of the other elected officials have had to, I represent that area, have had to take the lead in dealing with some of the problems down there. For example, I'll mention two of them. A lot of the people in some of those buildings who were young and could move have left the area. They've taken their kids. They're living with relatives or wherever. The old people, the elderly people, haven't been able to. They're stuck in those buildings. The home attendants can't get in or get out. The drugstores can't deliver pharmaceuticals. The drugstores aren't functioning. They can't get their drugs, so we have to deal with that. In addition to which,
sounds to me then that there is a way to use a lot of those people who are trying to volunteer.
Well, there will be, but that has to be coordinated. But I want to say one other thing. There are at least 1,500 to 2,000 apartments that are uninhabitable at this point, right across from the World Trade Center. We're asking the governor and the mayor. I spoke to the White House this morning to make the housing facilities on Governor's Island available, at least on a temporary emergency basis, for some of the people who can't get to their buildings, they can't get to their apartments.
Bobby,
I want to ask Mr. Zogby something because I know you have to leave here in just a few moments. We heard Aaron Brown talk about an incident earlier this morning at Boston's Logan Airport on a Delta flight that had to be stopped and deplaned and searched and bomb sniffed and everything else, and that a man was taken off that plane because he was vaguely Arab looking. I know that comment concerned you.
Hurts. I'm vaguely Arab looking, and my kids are too. I mean, maybe a little more than vaguely. The fact is, Bobby, that we've seen this all over the country, and this is one of the problems we're having is that, in fact, people are being targeted because they look Arab. And that includes Hispanics and some African Americans and Filipinos are being attacked and called Arabs. This cannot happen, and it should not happen. And one of the things I think your program does so well is bring this discussion to a wider public to say, don't let there be an assumption of collective guilt, because if you do, we're really falling into a very dangerous pit that will divide our country and make us weaker. Look, I've seen situations where, just the other night, I was doing your show, I think, one of the shows on this network, and they were reporting that a number of people were arrested at JFK and taken off the planes and handcuffed and so on and so forth. Justice Department told us the next day they were all freed, and it was bogus. But in the meantime, there was this fear that the Arabs are back at it again. This was a problem. 19 people did evil, and we need to find ways to protect ourselves, to ferret out this problem, but we cannot fall down the deep hole of racial prejudice, because if we do, it will be a nightmare for all of us at the end.
James Zogby, I know that you have to leave. Thanks very much for joining us today. I always appreciate your perspective on this. Eddie, you are an American. Yes. You have ties to Iran. Mm-hmm. You sort of feel like you have no country, is what you told me.
No, I'm very so delighted to be in this country for 30 years. I have learned so much. It's beyond my imagination.
You have some of the same obvious concerns that Mr. Zogby was talking about.
Yes. I have a comment, and then I have a question for the guests. The comment is that I have watched this suffering and pain that has happened through this tragic event in New York. To me, this suffering and pain is not American suffering. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's not Western suffering. It's a humanity suffering. So the suffering that has happened in the Palestinian families, can we feel the same way we feel today? The suffering is happening in the Israeli family. Can we feel the same way they feel today? This is a suffering of the humanity. So this is what the challenge is for all the leaders and every human being, that we have to go to our heart, and wherever the suffering is, it is our suffering. It is just one suffering. There is no division. So the division that is taking place in this world, which is the Western world, and then the free world, and not free world. And my question then is to these leaders that they are making this horrendous decision today, is that there has been so much effort to bring the freedom to the Eastern Europe. Why there is no? Most of these terrorists came from the Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Arab Emirates, and all of these